Welcome back. You are listening to the home of forbidden romances. Prepare yourself, because tonight's story will leave you breathless. The crystal goblet shattered against the marble floor, the sharp sound cutting through the orchestral swell like a guillotine blade dropping in a silent square. I didn't just drop the wine, I threw it. Specifically, I threw the entire contents of a vintage Pinot Noir onto the pristine white military dress uniform of Crown Prince Cassian, the man who, according to the script of this cursed world, was destined to execute me in exactly 3 months. The ballroom of the imperial palace, a cavern of gold leaf and judging eyes, fell into a silence so profound I could hear the blood rushing in my own ears. I stood there, trembling not with the fear of the pathetic, devoted Omega named Julian I had inhabited 3 days ago, but with the adrenaline of a man who had decided to burn the script before it could burn him. "You are dismissed," I said, my voice ringing out clearer than the crystal shards at my feet. "Consider this engagement annulled, Your Highness. I find your company suffocating." The collective gasp of the nobility sucked the air out of the room. This wasn't just a scandal, it was suicide. An Omega rejecting an Imperial Alpha? It was unheard of. It was heresy. Cassian, wiping a streak of red wine from his cheek, looked less like a jilted lover and more like a predator whose prey had just bitten back. His eyes, typically a charming azure, darkened into abyssal pools of rage. The pheromones rolled off him in suffocating waves, burnt sugar and ozone, designed to force me to my knees in submission. "Julian," Cassian growled, the alpha command lacing his tone, vibrating in the very marrow of my bones. "Kneel and apologize. Now." My knees buckled. It was biological instinct, the cursed physiology of this body betraying me. But I bit my tongue until I tasted copper, using the sharp jolt of pain to anchor my mind. I forced my spine straight, defying the crushing weight of his aura. "I think not," I whispered, turning my back on the future emperor. I scanned the horrified crowd, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I needed a shield. A weapon, a monster worse than the one behind me, and there he was, standing in the shadows of the colonnade, detached from the glittering frivolity, was Grand Duke Alaric Thorne, the Wolf of the North, the man the original story painted as a ruthless warmonger who would eventually tear the empire apart. He held a glass of whiskey, his eyes, molten gold and utterly terrifying, watching me with mild amusement. He was the villain's rival. He was death personified. He was my only way out. I walked toward him, every step a battle against the trembling in my legs. The crowd parted like the Red Sea, terrified of being caught in the crossfire between the Crown Prince and the Grand Duke. I stopped before him. Up close, Alaric was massive, a wall of black velvet and muscle. He smelled of pine, winter frost, and old blood. "Lord Thorne," I said, my voice steady despite the terror clawing at my throat. He arched a dark brow, looking down at me as one might look at an interesting bug. "Lord Julian, you seem to have made a mess." "I'm cleaning up my life," I corrected. "I need a carriage out of the capital. Tonight." "And why?" Alaric murmured, leaning down, his voice a low rumble that vibrated in my chest. "Would I aid the Crown Prince's discarded toy?" "Because I'm not a toy," I said, meeting his golden gaze. "And because I know where the Emperor hid the sapphire decree. The one that proves your family wasn't traitorous. It proves you have the rightful claim to the northern silver mines." It was a gamble. In the original novel, Alaric spent 5 years searching for that document. I was handing him 5 years of his life back. His eyes narrowed, the amusement vanishing, replaced by a razor-sharp calculation. For a second, I thought he might kill me right there for knowing too much. Then, a slow, terrifying smile curved his lips. He extended a gloved hand. "Shall we go then, little bird? Before the prince remembers, he owns the guards." I took his hand. Felt like grabbing a live wire. "Lead the way, your grace." The carriage ride to the northern duchy took 4 days. For days of silence, tension, and a growing, unspoken war of attrition. Alaric Thorne did not trust me. That much was obvious. He regarded me as a spy, a trap set by the Crown Prince, despite the public spectacle I had caused. He spent the journey reading documents, his long legs stretched out, invading my personal space in the cramped luxury of the carriage. I spent the time shivering. The body of Julian Vane was weak. He had been bred for aesthetics, not endurance. The transition from the temperate capital to the biting cold of the north was brutal. I had no furs, only the silk finery I had fled in. On the third night, as the carriage navigated the treacherous mountain passes of the Frostfall Ridge, the temperature plummeted. My teeth chattered so violently I couldn't stop them. I curled into the corner, hugging my knees, trying to preserve body heat. A heavy weight suddenly settled over me. I blinked open my eyes to find Alaric's fur-lined cloak draped over my shoulders. It was heavy, warm, and saturated with his scent. That crisp, masculine smell of winter pine. It was overwhelming, triggering a heat deep in my belly that had nothing to do with temperature. "If you freeze to death," Alaric said without looking up from his book, "you cannot tell me where the decree is. Dead men are useless to me." "Thank you," I murmured, pulling the cloak tighter. "Don't thank me yet," he warned. "If you lied to me, Julian, I will throw you off this mountain myself." "I didn't lie. We shall see." He finally looked at me, his golden eyes catching the flicker of the carriage lantern. "Why did you do it? You were obsessed with Cashin. The whole empire knew you worshipped the ground he walked on." "People change," I said evasively. "Not that fast," he countered. "And not that violently." You looked at him with hatred. Real hatred. An Omega does not hate their bonded Alpha unless the bond is broken. "We were never bonded," I snapped, defensive. "He never marked me." "Lucky for you," Alaric mused. "Cashin breaks his toys. I've seen the ones he discards. They don't have enough mind left to throw wine." "He was going to kill me," I admitted softly. The truth felt safer than a lie with a man like Alaric. I realized I was walking into my own execution. I chose to walk away. Alaric studied me for a long moment, his gaze dissecting me. For the first time, I saw something other than suspicion in his eyes. Curiosity. "You have survival instincts," he said, sounding surprised. "Rare for a palace flower." "I'm a weed, your grace," I said, closing my eyes. Harder to kill. Life in Thorn Manor was a study in isolation. The servants were terrified of me, likely assuming I was a spy. The castle itself was a fortress of black stone and drafty corridors. I was given a room in the west wing, far from the master's quarters, which suited me fine. I needed time to plan. I provided the location of the decree, hidden in the false bottom of a statue in the imperial garden, and Alaric's spies retrieved it within the week. When he held the document in his hands, watching the imperial seal gleam in the firelight of his study, the atmosphere in the castle shifted. I was no longer a prisoner. I was a guest. But with safety came new dangers, specifically my own biology. I had forgotten that Julian's body was approaching its cycle. In the original novel, this was the week Cashin would have forced himself on Julian, cementing the tragic bond. Without an alpha, the heat was a fever that burned through the blood, turning reason into ash. I locked myself in my room. I barricaded the door. I drowned myself in cold baths, biting through leather straps to keep from screaming. But the scent cannot be contained. On the third day of my confinement, the door handle turned. It was locked, but the wood groaned under immense pressure. "Julian." Alaric's voice was low, strained. "Go away," I gasped, huddled in the corner of the bed, sweat plastering my silver hair to my forehead. "Don't come in. Your scent is flooding the entire wing," Alaric growled through the door. "My guards are getting restless. I had to dismiss them." "I can't help it," I sobbed, the pain in my abdomen twisting like a knife. "It will pass." "It won't pass without damage if you don't take suppressants." "Open the door." "I don't have any." A silence. Then a heavy thud. The wood splintered. The door swung open. Alaric stood there, his chest heaving. His pupils were blown wide, swallowing the gold irises. He looked feral. The scent of an omega in distress triggered the deepest, most primal instincts of an alpha. He should have been driven by lust. But as he stepped into the room, fighting for control, I saw the sheer force of will etched onto his face. He wasn't here to take, he was here to help. He crossed the room in 2 strides. I flinched, expecting to be pinned, to be used. It was the fate of omegas in this world. Instead, he knelt beside the bed. His large, calloused hand cupped my burning cheek, his thumb brushing away a tear. "Breathe," he commanded, his voice rough but gentle. He produced a small vial from his pocket. High-grade alchemical suppressants. The kind that cost a fortune. "Drink," he ordered, uncorking it with his teeth. I drank it greedily. The relief was almost instant, a cooling wave washing over the fire in my blood. My breathing slowed. My vision cleared. I slumped back against the pillows, exhausted. Alaric remained kneeling, his hand lingering near my face, trembling slightly. "You didn't," I whispered, looking at him with wide eyes. "You could have." "I am not Cassian," Alaric said, his voice harsh as if insulted. "I do not take what is not freely given. And I certainly do not prey on the delirious." He stood up, adjusting his cuffs, regaining his composure as the pheromones in the room began to dissipate. "Why didn't you ask for help?" he demanded. I thought you would see it as an invitation." Alaric looked down at me, his expression unreadable. "You have a very low opinion of alphas, Julian." "I have a realistic opinion based on experience," I countered. "Then redefine your reality," he said. "You are under my protection. That includes protection from me." He turned to leave, but paused at the door. "The decree has been verified. The mines are mine. You held up your end of the bargain. Does that mean I have to leave?" I asked, a sudden spike of fear piercing my chest. Alaric looked back. The golden eyes were softer now, simmering with something complex. "No. It means you are safe. Rest now, Julian." Months passed. The winter thawed into a fragile spring. The dynamic between us shifted. I began assisting him with the estate's ledger. Julian's education in mathematics was surprisingly advanced, a detail the original author had wasted. Alaric began to seek my counsel not just on numbers but on people. We spent evenings in the library, arguing over philosophy and politics, the fireplace roaring between us. It was a slow burn. A glance held a second too long. A hand brushing against mine as we exchanged papers. The way he would stand between me and the door whenever a stranger entered the room. I was falling for the villain. And God help me, the villain was falling for me. But the past has a way of clawing its way back. The invitation arrived on a black scroll, sealed with the imperial crest. The Grand Duke Alaric Thorne is summoned to the capital for the Emperor's Jubilee. He is to bring his guest, the Lord Julian Vane. It wasn't an invitation. It was a summons. And a threat. "You don't have to go," Alaric said, crushing the scroll in his fist. "We were in the greenhouse, the only warm place in the north. I can hide you. If I don't go, Cassian will use it as an excuse to invade," I said, pruning a rosebush with trembling hands. "He wants me back. His pride can't handle the rejection." "It's not just pride," Alaric muttered, stepping closer. "He knows what you are." I froze. "What I am? You haven't noticed?" Alaric reached out, his fingers tracing the line of my jaw. "You are a Mercury Omega. It's rare. Legend says a Mercury Omega amplifies the power of their bonded alpha tenfold. That's why he wanted you. That's why he was going to kill you, to harvest your blood if he couldn't bond with you." The realization hit me like a physical blow. The poisoning plot in the original novel. It was a cover-up. Cassian had planned to drain Julian dry to secure his throne. "I have to go back," I said, my voice hardening. "I have to face him. If I run forever, he will hunt us both down." "Us," Alaric repeated, the word hanging heavy in the air. "Yes, us." I looked up at him. Unless you want me to leave? Alaric didn't speak. He closed the distance between us, his presence enveloping me. He lowered his head, his forehead resting against mine. If you walk into that palace, he whispered, I will burn it to the ground before I let him touch you. Then let's bring matches, I replied. The return to the capital was a military operation masked as a diplomatic visit. Alaric brought his personal guard, the Black Iron Legion. We entered the ballroom, the same room where I had shattered the wine glass months ago, arm in arm. I wore black and gold, the colors of House Thorn. It was a declaration of war. Cashin sat on the dais, flanked by his guards. He looked worse, gaunt, manic. The absence of the Mercury Omega had clearly stalled his plans for magical supremacy. When he saw us, he stood up, knocking over his chair. You dare bring him here? Cashin shouted, his voice cracking. He is a fugitive, an escaped criminal. He is my consort, Alaric announced, his voice booming through the hall. And he is under the protection of the North. Consort, Cashin laughed, a high hysterical sound. He is mine. He was promised to me. The prince descended the stairs, drawing his ceremonial sword. The music stopped. The nobles scrambled back. Come here, Julian, Cashin commanded, extending his hand. The alpha command washed over the room, heavy and sickening. Several weaker Omegas in the crowd fainted. I felt the pull, the biological urge to obey. But it was distant, muffled. Alaric stepped in front of me. He didn't draw a weapon. He simply released his own aura. If Cashin's aura was a wave, Alaric's was a tsunami. It was cold, crushing, and absolute. The floorboards cracked beneath his boots. The pressure was so intense that the windows of the ballroom rattled. One step closer, Alaric said, his voice terrifyingly calm. And I will remove your head, prince or not. You can't have him, Cashin screamed, his eyes glowing red. He is my fated mate. The stars decreed it. The stars were wrong, I said, stepping out from behind Alaric. I looked at Cashin with pity. The bond. You never felt it, did you? You just wanted the power. You convinced yourself it was fate. I turned to Alaric. I reached up and loosened his collar, exposing the junction of his neck and shoulder. Bite me, I whispered. Alaric looked at me, shocked. Julian here? In front of them? Do it. Show him. Show them all. Alaric didn't hesitate. He wrapped an arm around my waist, pulling me flush against him. He buried his face in the crook of my neck. The pain was sharp, electric, and ecstatic. As his teeth broke the skin, marking my scent gland, a shockwave of energy blasted through the room. It wasn't just a mark. It was a soul bond. Violet and gold light erupted from us, blinding the court. The magic of the Mercury Omega reacting with its true vessel. The energy surged into Alaric. He roared, a sound of pure power, as his aura doubled, then tripled. The sheer force of it knocked Cashin off his feet, sending him sliding across the polished floor. When the light faded, I was panting, clinging to Alaric. The mark on my neck pulsed with golden light. Alaric looked like a god of war. His eyes were glowing, his skin humming with the amplified magic. Cashin lay on the floor, his sword broken, his authority shattered. He looked small, defeated. It seems, Alaric said, his voice echoing with double-layered power, that fate has made its choice. He looked down at the cowering prince. The engagement is annulled, Cashin. Permanently. The fallout was swift. With his power exposed as inferior and his mental state deteriorating, the emperor was forced to abdicate the succession in favor of a regency council, led, ironically, by the Grand Duke. We returned to the north not as fugitives, but as the de facto rulers of the empire's future. I stood on the balcony of Thorn Manor, watching the snow fall over the jagged peaks. The cold didn't bother me anymore. The bond with Alaric kept me warm, a constant hum of affection and strength in the back of my mind. Strong arms wrapped around my waist from behind. Alaric rested his chin on my shoulder, nuzzling the mating mark he had left there. "Regretting your choice?" he murmured. "You could have been empress." "I was never meant to be an empress," I said, leaning back into him. "I was meant to be alive." "You are more than alive, Julian," he said, turning me around to face him. His golden eyes were full of a devotion that terrified and thrilled me. "You are my heart, my conscience, my equal." He kissed me, slow and deep, tasting of winter and whiskey. I had transmigrated into a tragedy and rewritten it into a legend. I had ditched the toxic prince, defied the script, and tamed the monster. And looking at the man who would burn the world for me, I knew the story was just beginning. And that is how the viper tamed the wolf. If you enjoyed seeing Julian take control of his destiny, destroy that like button. And tell me in the comments. Would you forgive a fiancé who tried to kill you for power? Or would you destroy his entire bloodline? I'll be reading your answers. Subscribe for the next chapter. Until then,